We're starting to get some price targets, not from crypto natives, but from TradFi. So maybe it's more significant when it comes from TradFi. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure. But here are some Bitcoin price targets. 250K on the low end for this upcoming bull market. Chamath says 500K, 1 million at the high end. And this is Vance saying 250K still feels low to me. Only 30 to 40% of gold. Approximately 0 millennials want to own gold. I mean, that's true. That's definitely true for me. I just like, when crypto exists, why own gold? But Vance saying that 250K still feels low, but TradFi is in that range. That's kind of the lower end of the TradFi estimates. You mentioned Chamath here. So this is like Chamath, notable investor, podcast host in the All In podcast, right? Mm-hmm. I think I saw a clip circulating. I haven't watched it yet, but Chamath, I think this is probably on All In, giving his Bitcoin price estimates and the reasons why. Should we play this?
Yeah, so this take clip from Chamath happened after the All In besties were talking about the political favorability to crypto as a result of the Ethereum ETF and the election. And then Chamath starts pivoting into Bitcoin price targets. So let's go ahead and get into that clip right now.
You should really look at the pattern of Bitcoin after a halving. So here's a little Bitcoin price analysis for you guys. So there's been a couple of halving cycles that have happened. And I asked him to go back and look at the price performance 1 month after a halving, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and 18 months after a halving. And what you notice is that there are these moments initially where essentially when you go through a Bitcoin halving, people are sort of reassessing what's happening and they're trying to figure it out. That's sort of what I would say happens in the first month and roughly what also happens in the first 3 months. But then within 6 months to a year and 18 months of these things, there are these crazy price appreciation cycles that happen. So that's what this page shows, which is, 18 months after the first halving, the Bitcoin price returned 45x. After the second halving, it returned almost 28x. And after this third halving, it returned almost an 8x, which is really incredible returns in such a short period of time. If you go to the next page. And so if you graph that, this is what it starts to show, which is what is this price performance after each of these halving cycles. Now, why is that interesting? Well, it's interesting because on top of this halving, which theoretically, if history is a guide, we should see some price appreciation. Obviously, the other thing that's happened is we've commercialized Bitcoin. And we talked about this sort of as my big prediction for 2024, which is these ETFs are really going to allow Bitcoin to cross the chasm and have its sort of central key moment, right? And so if you apply the averages, and again, these are just averages, they're by no means predictions. Okay, so I just want to qualify that.
Yeah,
these are
this is not financial advice.
It's not financial advice. These are just guesses. Data. We took these and we applied it to the price of Bitcoin. And if you go to the next page, you start to see what could happen if you just take the average of the last few cycles. So because the first cycle was so extreme, and you start to...
so you're just doing cycle 2 and 3 here, to be clear.
Just the averages of cycle 2 and 3. And what you start to see is some really meaningful appreciation. And when I talked to Wences about this, how he explained it, which makes a lot of sense to me, is there are a lot of countries that will never look at Bitcoin credibly, even if they support it. The US may be one of those. But there's an increasing body of countries that will become dual currency. And they will look at their local currency, and then they will look at Bitcoin. And they will say both of these two things are needed. One, when you're transacting on a daily basis for random goods and services. And two, when you need to buy a permanent asset that needs to have residual value, you'll use something like BTC. And I think that's a very powerful concept. And if you look at what this price chart could indicate, is that if this thing starts to get to these levels of appreciation, it is going to completely replace gold and start to become something that has transactional utility for hard assets. And I think if you marry that with this worry that some folks have about dollar debasement, you start to see some really interesting opportunities.
Okay, so the prices on the screen, since he never actually said them, is 9 months out a Bitcoin price of $240,000 from the halving, 9 months from the halving, 12 months out, $360,000, and then 18 months out, almost $500,000. So very large price targets. And this is Chamath on, I think, actually the most downloaded podcast that exists and the most listened to podcast in shared like dollar terms. And so the influence
at least
of
like
Chamath himself.
tech podcast, I would say, tech investor podcast, most downloaded, right? Like it's very influential.
It's in the top 5 podcasts, like full stop. Like it doesn't matter what category. And so the amount of influence that this podcast has itself can like actually like help create this outcome.
But he was saying 3 things. So like one, he tethered this with the halvening, which I want to come back to when we talk about this concept of the banana zone. And 2, he said this time it's different because of the institutional inroads that Bitcoin has made. And then 3, he talks about the split between like currencies moving towards store of value versus payment currencies. Like medium of exchange would be our parlance for that, basically. And he said for like non-US countries, maybe at some level even the US in the future, but probably not this cycle, they will begin to think of their currency and their central bank as, like we need a store of value. We need sort of like a gold or like a Bitcoin. And then we also need our fiat, which is just a payment currency.
To continue leveling up your crypto game, then you need to get on the Bankless newsletter. It's the world's most popular crypto email and is completely free. Just click below to sign up.